Hey guys, I'm John and this is All He Makes. Today we're going to turn this board into a cutting board, but not just any cutting board.
This is the start of a new series of projects I'm interested in where I bring some of the many recipes in Animal Crossing New Horizons into real life. Making cutting boards seemed like a good starting point. It's actually pretty simple, and I may have broken my other cutting board recently. So anyways, let's see how it's made. Looks simple enough. Let's get to it. I'm going to do this whole project using a 1x8 piece of maple that's 4 feet long. The recipe in Animal Crossing yields a very light cutting board, but calls for hardwood, so maple seemed like a great choice. I figured out the cutting board should be about 16 inches long, 10 3/4 inches wide, and 1.5 inches thick, using my reference, which makes this a fairly beefy cutting board. In order to get close to that, I cut my pieces into 3 equal sections. That way I can rip cut just one of my sections in half to find the total width that I need. It's important in projects like this to adjust the project to fit your materials and not the other way around. With the pieces cut, I spread some glue on one of my sections and edge join it to one of the rip cut pieces. I only have 2 clamps on hand, so I'll be doing all of my clamping in stages. With that dry, I move on to the next panel. At this point, I didn't have a good way to clamp both panels together, so I broke down and got 2 more clamps. Now that I have my 2 pieces of hardwood called for in the recipe, I'm spreading a lot of glue and sandwiching the 2 panels together so the glued seams aren't on the same side. Apparently I needed more clamps than this because I ended up with some slight gaps once it dried. Once the block is set, I can go to work matching my design I'll cut out to my reference. I don't have a very steady drawing hand, so making the design symmetrical is a bit of a challenge for me. I got better results by getting one side to a shape I liked, tracing that onto a piece of paper, adding a whole bunch of graphite to that trace, then flipping the paper over and rubbing the trace line into the board where I wanted it. That leaves an imprint of my trace on the opposite side. Now that the cut line is drawn, it's time to cut it out. I'll admit I way underestimated how difficult it is cutting through 1.5 inches of hardwood using a jigsaw. I quickly realized the clean cut blade I was using was burning the wood, so I switched to a fast cut blade and it worked much better. There's a slight taper running down the edge of the cutting board, so I opt for a circular saw to make the cutting go faster. Lastly, the hole in the handle gets cut out by first drilling a space for the jigsaw to fit, then chipping away at it. For the first round of sanding, I'm using 80 grit sandpaper and my random orbit sander to clean up some of the jagged cut lines, but also to add all of the rounded edges and corners I need, since I don't have a router. For the inside corners and the hole in the middle, I actually mock up a makeshift drum sander by supergluing a sanding disc to a wooden dowel and then mounting that in my drill. After rough sanding and shaping, I bring the board back inside because it's really cold out, and notice the gaps I mentioned earlier. To fix this, I mix some of the sawdust from sanding with wood glue to make a paste I can fill the gaps with. This is a quick way to fix voids and usually matches fairly well since you're using the same type of wood. I then spend some more time with the 80 grit sandpaper sanding down the leftover filler before sanding the whole thing down with 220 grit to get a nice and smooth surface. I then remove the sawdust with a shop cloth. Lastly, I use this cutting board oil, which you can find at any big box store, to prep the cutting board for use. I'm just following the recommendations on the bottle and add 3 coats with about 20 minutes in between each coat. Once the board is oiled, it's done! Wait, I think it's missing something. Yeah, there we go. But the true test is to see how one of my villagers likes it. Gross. Glad he likes it though.
So there you go, the cutting board from Animal Crossing New Horizons made in real life. I had so much fun making this, and this is actually the first cutting board I've ever made, so it's sort of like a rite of passage for any woodworker, although I'm glad I had my own little twist on it. If there's anything else you'd like to see me make in the future, feel free to leave a comment below. Also, if you like this video, please leave a like and maybe subscribe. Until then, see you in my next project.